So to fill in for Carol Ann Chenard and Silviu Petrescu, we have some OSA subs. You know them well, of course, Mark Marshall and Bobby Lennox. The minute the refs show up, we'll kick them out. Beside them, the really important people, we have our guests Nigel Best on the outside there. Nigel is the coach education manager of the Irish Football Association. Behind him, you recognize him, I'm sure, it's Rob Gale, Canadian men's under-20 head coach. And the man beside him is Ian Barker, Director of Coaching Education for the NSCAA in the States. Now, there will be a Q&A via Twitter. All right, so if you have questions, you can tweet at @OSA_tweeter, I think is what it is. Give us your thoughts, your questions about player development, club development, etc., etc. But we're going to start today with a very important issue, a big reason why a lot of you are here today, coaching development. And Nigel, I thought I'd start with you here. Northern Ireland has been so successful in recent months. A tiny country, population under 2 million. You qualify for the European Championships. You've qualified for, I think, 3 World Cups in the past, not for a while yet, but 3 World Cups. Can you explain to us how much the current coaching evolution in Northern Ireland has been a result of that success or vice versa?
As you alluded to, we did not qualify for a major tournament after 1986, so there was a long barren spell. And apart from the idea that success promotes and generates interest in the game, it also generates revenue, and for a small country, the money from the major competitions is important. So we had to have a re-evaluation of potential reasons why we were not making qualification. And it's easy to make excuses that it's hard to get players over to the main league in England because of the number of imported players from foreign countries and therefore less places for Northern Ireland players. But you then say, well, let's look at a more positive way of dealing with this, and that is, let's take the onus onto ourselves and develop the players better from grassroots up. And in order to do that, you need to reevaluate your coach education program so that you're producing coaches at the grassroots level, the volunteer coaches working from 6 years upwards at club level. Upskill them sufficiently that you're now becoming a better production line of talented players as well as talented coaches. And in addition, can we get coaches good enough to make it across professionally, full-time, across the water? Because again, that's a supply link into our international teams if you have highly qualified and experienced coaches working across on the mainland in England. So that was the rationale behind it. And over the last 10 or more years, we re-evaluated our coach education, particularly at the lower levels, because UEFA dictate what the content of their courses would be. So we have no control in that, but we can control our own generic Irish Football Association courses. So we modified those, and we think it has produced or is starting to produce better coaches and consequently probably better players.
Rob, would you say it's fair to say that it's imperative you get your coaching development on track first? That's, in many ways, it's more important than player development. You know, that'll come, the kids will come, but you have to get a system in place that is going to embrace and nurture those kids.
Absolutely. I think the old saying about you give a man a fish and he can feed himself, you teach him how to fish. It's the same without coach development and coach education, then we can't improve player development. So it's absolutely vital. And, you know, we were discussing this earlier, but I think if we're in the Canadian game, and I've done my UEFA badges, I've done my US badges, it's vital that we also take the Canadian courses. And we're the people in the game here, because the Canadian course teaches you about our realities and our development. So I'm a big believer in coach education, and especially in the country that if you're earning money out of the game, then you need to contribute to the Canadian course.
Thanks, Rob. As you see, our other guests have arrived here, so thankfully we didn't need to hear from Mark or Bobby. I jest, of course.
Vergara, I haven't had lunch yet. Look, he went to get lunch first. I skipped lunch to be here, and he turns up late. That's a yellow card already, mate.
I'd like to welcome Carol Ann Chenard, of course, FIFA referee. We have Silviu Petrescu, of course, a FIFA referee, the 2012 MLS Referee of the Year as well, and Hector Vergara, an ex-FIFA match official and currently the Executive Director of the Manitoba Soccer Association. Thank you for joining us today. We're talking about coaching development. And Ian, let's get to you now. The States have taken this seriously for a long time now. And I think we're seeing the rewards, throughout the US system, from college to MLS to international. Where would you say you're at right now with your coaching development?
I think we're competitive relative to CONCACAF, and certainly UEFA would be the gold standard, I think, that we aspire to when we look at. Taking the fish metaphor, I'll use another metaphor. When the oxygen masks fall out of the ceiling on your flight, you're encouraged to put them on first before you help other people. And so this notion, if we get the coaching right, then we can legitimately help our athletes. One of our challenges, and it's statistically common around the world, is dropout rates at certain ages. So one of the standards we hold our coaches to as we train them is improving retention rates, but improving the retention rates by intelligent coaching, which fosters intrinsic motivation, and the kids want to come back because they love soccer. And we're doing quite well at that. One of our big influences, as I'm sure is common around the world, is a little bit more child development theory, a little bit more psychology, a little bit more pedagogy. And there's a great thirst for education in general in North America. And so we have unbelievable numbers of coaches who aren't compensated for their time attending coaching education, as well as the young men and women that want to coach in our professional leagues and our national teams.
One question I always wonder is, and the playing side in the States, the women's game is being cutting edge. You are the best team, the best program probably in world football, as Canada found out and keeps finding out, although maybe the gap's growing smaller, who knows. From a coaching standpoint, all these coaching initiatives, are you getting both male and female coaches, or is there a shortage of female coaches still?
We have lower numbers of female coaches, but I don't think it's exclusively a sexism issue. There are certainly issues for that. But there's a lot of research on why female coaches and former female athletes choose not to coach at higher levels. And it's not exclusively because of family and child rearing, which is a somewhat unsophisticated opinion. There's some deep structural reasons why our female coaches aren't prolonging their careers and going through. Those that are at the top of their game, like Jill Ellis, there's some amazing US college coaches. Because they're relatively small in number, the demand on their time is really high. They're coaching national teams. So we don't actually get many of those women to come into our coaching education delivery, which is a real problem. I have a small cadre of female instructors, but not enough relative to the number of females that are coming to the courses.
Nigel, you're seeing progress in the Northern Irish Association regarding female coaches. Is it still very much a boys' club?
Well, the boys' club seems to suggest that the door's closed. It's not, and I agree with what has just been said. It's not that there is any attempt to exclude females from the coach education process. They just are not committing to it, and we have not found a clear reason to explain. We've tried to run female-only courses. We still didn't get the numbers, and when those who did apply for that were asked that they want to go in with their male colleagues on a mixed course, they were happy to do it. And in fact, what they then said was they preferred that because A, they didn't want to be separated and be an exclusive group, and B, they found it more helpful to interact with their male colleagues to look at the nature of the game and the speed at which it was played at, which they thought was more challenging for them as coaches. So we have very few. I think we had to do an audit because UEFA are coming to inspect us, and they wanted to know because they're trying to promote female coaches. We only have had, since 2005, 3 ladies who reached UEFA A licence. That's all that's come through our association. And we have had nobody, not even an applicant, on the pro licence. So we're a long way off yet from getting the sufficient supply of females through to support the game, whether it's working at grassroots with mixed groups or working specifically in the ladies' game. and we're trying, but I have to be honest, we're not successful at the moment.
I think Carol Ann's a prime example of the progress that is being made though here in North America. We're seeing more and more now coaching programs involving officials. Maybe we didn't see that before. How important is it, do you think, both from a coaching perspective and also from a refereeing perspective, to have officials involved in those classroom and on-field sessions?
I think it's essential. I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm losing my voice, so it's a little bit manly, so I don't know if I apply. It's extremely important. I think for refereeing, we need to see top-level soccer to become top-level referees. The higher level soccer we see, the better it is for refereeing. And in Canada, we don't necessarily have the top-level women's league that we need. Has a long enough season that we can see enough games at the highest level. Being exposed to top-level men's soccer is what we have to do right now. But also, I think it's important that the referees that have been there and the coaches that have been there come back and talk to the grassroots referees and coaches coming up, because it's just another way to get experience and another way to hopefully inspire somebody to pick up refereeing. Refereeing isn't something that people usually say, I want to be a referee at a young age, and are very enthusiastic about. So it's about finding ways to get them engaged in the game, whether it be from a coaching perspective or from a refereeing perspective. Getting them engaged, giving them those opportunities, young referees having the opportunity to do games. For me, what was really important was people recognized my ability. And I had a couple carrots, here, try this tournament, that kind of thing. That was what kept me going. When people asked me when I was 15, 16, do you want to be a FIFA referee? I looked them in the eyes and I said yes, but in my head I was saying, no way. I had other things that I was an athlete in another sport, and I had other things, but my goals changed, and those small little pats on the back and a coach who wrote, I don't want to say discovered, but a big part of how I got recognized by the Ontario Soccer Association was an old timers men's team wrote a provincial association about me and said, she just refereed our game on Friday night, you need to come watch her. And that's really important, because that's how you're going to find the next level coaches, the next level referees, and taking that time to pat me on the back was a really big part of, during the tough years of refereeing, 15, 16, 17, 18, when you're getting yelled at on the local pitch and the parents are not very pleasant. That was a really big part in keeping me involved in the game. So,
Hector and Silviu, I'm sure at this point you've been asked to join this new mentality in coaching, bringing the officials in to talk to the players, and perhaps bringing coaches into the referee programs as well, and asking them to teach and talk to potential referees, officials. How important is that, do you think? And if that was available to you when you were learning your trade, would that have been invaluable?
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, I can give you information related to what we did pre-World Cup for both the Women's World Cup and the Men's World Cup. And part of the relationship that has to be established between referees, coaches, players is a lot of communication. And people will claim that the World Cup was a difficult World Cup in Brazil. It was many decisions were not correct. But you notice on the field of play that there was very little dissent, either from players or from coaches. And the same thing happened in the Women's World Cup in Canada. And part of that is that we're opening the door to the relationship between referees and coaches and players. In every single one of those competitions, there was meetings between the referees and the coaches and all the players. There was a meeting, we call it team arrival meetings, and they're held with every single one of the teams, both in the women's competition and in the men's competition. And you essentially meet with the players, the coaches, and you go over all different situations that can happen in a match and the expectations that the referee panel has of the players and coaches, and vice versa. And I think this is a very important step to making sure that there is a mutual understanding of what everyone's trying to do and a mutual respect, because at the end of the day, the game is very difficult from both perspectives. The game is very fast now, and coaches as players are human beings, and so are referees. Players make mistakes, coaches make mistakes, and so do referees. So having that communication open, I think, is a big step going forward in order to assist not only the development of the game, but development of referees. Because as Carolyn said, there is a shortage of referees around the world. It's not a fact in Canada only. It's a fact around the world. Every single country doesn't have enough referees, and particularly not enough female referees. Yet the competitions for the females are officiated at the highest level by females. So, there is a push in CONCACAF, there's a push in Canada, there's a push around the world to make sure that we get more females in the game in order for us to have that development happen. And obviously, the communication is a big part of what goes on.
Silviu, it's concerning when you hear there's not enough referees around the world. There must be one main reason for that. And do you think this mutual understanding and communication, which you're going to now get by involving referees, officials with coaches in coaching programs, will that help that and broach that? And will that result, do you think, in more officials being trained?
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Like Hector mentioned, it's part of the communication between the coaches, and the referees. One example, build a relationship, now being involved with the Major League Soccer. Major League Soccer starting tomorrow. For the preseason, we go to each teams, to present what happened last season, and we don't want to happen this season. Probably it's going to happen anyway, but we present everything what the leagues want, and build a relationship. It's part of what the leagues want. And back to the communication, it's better, to build communication between the referees and the coaches, And it was happening to me, we're going to build a communication and relationship with the coaches, before the games, during the games, after, And now being involved, with the high leagues, it's working.
Rob, you've coached around the world. You're coaching U20 men right now. They've got a certain swagger to them, I think it's fair to say. How important is it to involve officials now when you're training these players, get that communication, that empathy, maybe that's the right word to use here. Is it going to help? Is it helping?
No, I think it's they're doing a great job, to be fair. And Hector is my old boss in Manitoba there. I like to give him stick all the time with the referee development. But it's very important when we've been to the World Cup as well that we get a presentation before the tournament. Just clarification of maybe rule changes, etc. It's amazing how much you think you know until you then go through a test yourself and push yourself through that, coaches and players. So I think it's good. I think open lines of communication are vital. Players need to express their opinion, and when the referees can do the same in that environment, then it's only going to help the game going forward.
Nigel, I think your association was one of the forefathers of this whole idea of integrating referees, officials in your coaching programs. Were the results obvious straight away?
Well, there was a lot of respect shown during the presentations, but sometimes at the weekend it all went back out the window again because there's two sides to this story, because professional footballers play in a highly competitive environment, as do the managers, and they get abused from the crowd. And they have to take it. They have to have the mentality to be able to cope with that. And it's one thing that I say to the referees, look, that's just the environment. You're going to get comments or bad words or whatever, challenges to you at that end, because it's a competitive environment. Now, it's not to say that the abuse should be allowed to go beyond certain limits. I think there has to be an element of respect, but in the moment of a highly competitive, emotionally charged game, those issues of challenges to the referee's decision in a game which is very open, unlike rugby where there's a lot of aspects of the game that you can't see other than the referee can see the decision. Most of the crowd don't know why, even though the mics they're mic'd up now and they hear the explanation. Football's clear to everybody as in a continuous flow, so people get quick opinions. What I disagree with what has happened, which I think has been unfair to referees, is television pundits taking particular examples out of a game and analysing using slow motion, 6 different camera angles, and then saying the referee got it wrong. And they couldn't even make the correct decision as they watched it in normal time as a TV pundit. And I think that has caused problems to the referees. That type of analysis, I think, is unfair, totally. And I think it should be banned from the television. I don't think they should have any of that replay and analysis of a referee's decision. I think the referees themselves do it in the assessment process afterwards, and they will then see whether the decision was right. But if you remove that, I think it may reduce some of the criticism that we get amongst the normal public, who then think they're experts because they saw the pundits analyse and then they go into work. Did you see that referee? How could he not see that handball? I don't even know what a handball decision is any longer in football, so I don't even know how they're expected to make that decision either.
You know, I watched the North London derby this morning. Spurs drew Arsenal. Sorry, Rob. It's a gooner over there. And there were some controversial incidents. There's a red card and a non-card given. And it wasn't until full time when I saw 18 replays that I actually realized, yeah, they weren't very good calls after all. But if you had listened to the fans who saw one live action shot of what happened, you think they were the worst referees. It's such a hard job, and we do appreciate that. Ian, in the States, you know, you've been progressive in so many ways. From refereeing, do you find that is improving right now?
Well, definitely the referees improving all the time, as is the coaching and the playing. I'm really encouraged to hear that the general satisfaction with the behavior in the World Cup was satisfactory on both the men's and women's side. But what I would say to the audience, many of whom are coaching at the grassroots level, don't model off of what you see from Mourinho or Guardiola or Wenger, because they're in the professional environment. There's a lot of money, there's a lot of pressure. It's a different world. So as grassroots coaches going back into our community clubs, that's fun to watch, and that's what we do on a Saturday morning and afternoon maybe, but that has no translation to what the behavior of coaches should be and their interactions with referees should be at the grassroots level. And if we start getting it right there consistently, then maybe we'll start to see improvements at higher levels too. But it's theatre. That's what the EPL is. It's theatre, and it's not to be emulated in the youth environment.
Do you echo those thoughts as referees that, you know, obviously in the big money games, tensions are higher perhaps than they should be compared to a Sunday afternoon game in the local village green? Do you understand perhaps why that passion is more so and there is less respect?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's, as it was said, there's a lot of big money in the games, in the professional environment. And it's important that coaches realize that when we're playing under 9, it's not appropriate to be teaching an under 9 player how to take a dive. And I actually know of coaches in my own province who do that. We're actually trying to teach players of that age how to dive to gain a penalty versus teaching them how to develop themselves in the game. But I wanted to make a comment in particular about how coaching also impacts refereeing. Because part of what we do now at the highest level is we bring the coaching into the refereeing aspect. And we bring that element in because we have to understand how teams play the game. The game is extremely fast now. There is 16 goals scored in the men's World Cup that were scored with less than 2 touches, from one goal to the other. And the skill level of those players at that level is extremely good. And if referees aren't ready for that kind of game, in the modern game, as we call it in refereeing, then you're not going to have any success. So coaching is at the highest level now. We bring high-level coaches to actually speak to the referees and to talk about tactics and what to look for and how the players behave and what are the set plays. And we have a whole bunch of presentations that relate simply to that, because the referee needs as many tools as possible in order to manage a game. And at the end of the day, referees at the high level are managers of games. They're managers of people, managers of situations. Referees at that level, they know the loss of the game like the back of their hands. So it's more about how to interpret certain situations that happen so quickly. As you said, you know, we don't have a television camera that we can have 18 different looks at a play. We have 1 second to make a decision, and the referees have a very tough time to do that. And by bringing coaching into refereeing, it allows the referees to be better prepared, both physically and mentally and tactically, in order for them to be able to make the right decision at the right time.
Well, I mean, there's talk more and more now about video replay coming in at the highest level of the game, but the bottom line is there's only really a handful of games compared to how many games go on every year will have access to that technology. You know, college level sport, club level sport, grassroots soccer doesn't have video replay available. It never will. So how does referee keep up their pace to the modern game as it improves and gets faster and faster?
Like Hector said, is that working? Yeah, okay. Like Hector said, it's really about understanding the game, and he talked about the coaches coming in and talking about the tactical aspect. That's a huge part at the World Cup in preparing for our matches, is understanding how the teams play. A team that plays, you know, right from the back and a big kick and run to a fast forward from a refereeing perspective, that changes when I'm going to start to run, because I can't beat that ball and I'm going to have to make the decision in the penalty area. And we talk about big decisions and big games in the professional, and it's similar at the World Cup level where one decision affects the outcome of the game and teams going through. And so basically it's about understanding the game, and like Hector talked about, teaching starting at U9 and as it goes up, is as you teach the first stage is what's a foul, what's not a foul. Then it starts about interpreting the game and interpreting the laws and how to apply them and how to move, because the younger players, it's hard to read their tactics. Silviu and I can attest, because we did an under-14 game a couple months ago and got hit by the ball a few times because we didn't know where we should be going. Understanding the game so that we can be there. It's about being there when we need to make the decision. And we can't beat the ball, so we have to anticipate. So we have to learn to read and learn the new tactics. And the modern game is fast, and it requires a lot from the referees physically, mentally, to make decisions when we are extremely tired and have just run from one penalty area to another penalty area. And we need to gain every second we can. And if that's by understanding that I know that this player is probably going to boot that ball and I start 5 seconds early, then that's what I need to do, and I need to understand to get there. And it starts at the lowest, at the first time a referee goes out there, as they go through, having somebody there to talk to them about it, having mentors there who understand. I started refereeing because my soccer coach made my whole team take a laws of the game course, because they wanted us to understand the laws, so that when there were decisions, and they were very hard on us not to yell at the referees, but that's how I started refereeing. So my coach was very highly involved in getting me into the game and assigning games to me, because he worked for our local club. And I think that's really important, because I've been in some of those MLS sessions and I've been in some of the sessions with the players, and you're right, they don't know the laws. They don't know how to interpret them. You still hear the perpetuation of, you can't play the ball on the ground, you can't, over and over and over. And at the highest level, I can say, well, if you can find that in the law book, I will buy you a drink after this game. You can't do that at the lowest level, and we need to be able to teach them the fundamentals of soccer, how to play soccer, the touches, and then the fundamentals of refereeing.
Just in the back of that, I think there has been a failure on the part of football to educate young players, because I remember I went through my whole football career and never once looked at the laws of the game until I went on a coach education course. And I think we have young players, and I don't know if any of the audience's coaches actually work on the laws of the game with young players. So consequently, players go through from their youth right through to 19, 20 years of age without detailed knowledge of the laws of the game, and they make an assumption almost that, well, they're irrelevant, it's just an opinion, and therefore we will challenge the referee. So I think it's incumbent upon our coaches at clubs to educate young players as they get to the stage where they can understand things like the offside law, so that the players actually understand the rules, because I don't think most of them ever see the rule book as such in terms of education of what's a foul, what's indirect free kick, what's a deliberate trick, what's a handball. So I think it has to be a change in the coaching side as well.
Maybe that whole term interpretation of the rules is wrong. I mean, interpretation, no, this is what it is. It's black and white issue. I mean, maybe one day you can explain to me the handball rule, for example. I'm not quite sure. Yeah, it's an interpretation, right? Is it, on purpose? Here's a crazy one for you. Let Silviu start with this. You talk about, how it is harder. The game's quicker now to keep up with the play. We saw hockey implement a 2-referee system a few years ago now, because they couldn't keep up. It was too fast for them. Is there a day that you can foresee there being 2 referees on the field, or is that just the crazy ramblings of a media person?
In my opinion, probably it's not going to happen to have 2 referees inside the field of play. But with the technologies and video review, I can see that happen in the future, in soccer games, In MLS, we start talking, like the video review, and we have some training like last weekend. Probably it's going to happen sooner or later, but probably it's going to be for the better of the games. That's my opinion.
Do you all agree? This two referee idea is stupid, and perhaps instant replay, video replay is the only way to go?
Well, it goes back to this issue of interpretation, because the referee at that end of the pitch may see the handball as deliberate, a free kick.
That word again, isn't it?
A similar
Interpretation.
incident at the other end, and that referee is not giving that call, and all of a sudden it generates a dispute and frustration. I'm not convinced. I think there has to be a greater onus on the officials who are off the side of the pitch, whether it's running the touchline or behind the goal, to support the referee. But I think one official going down the main part of the pitch, I think, is enough.
Okay, no more two referee discussion here, I promise.
I was
It's
going to
just,
say, if you have problems with one, imagine having two and adding. But it's about consistency. It's about consistency. That's what we're learning. I mean, when we're training before a tournament, it's trying to get all of the referees doing different games with different backgrounds and different experiences to have a consistent interpretation. And it just makes it so much more difficult if you have two people on the field to come to a consistent interpretation, I think.
There's an important element about coaching and the loss of the game, and that if you're actually someone who has understanding of the loss of the game and you're a coach of soccer, you can actually take advantage of the loss of the game in a positive way, not to say that you're going to break the loss of the game. But if you understand, for example, the offside rule, you know that a player in an offside position is simply not offside. And you can put a player in an offside position. It's not against the loss of the game to put a player in an offside position. And there's tactical ways of actually using the loss of the game to your advantage. Overlapping runs, sometimes players who play up defensive players play up, try to play the trap, and then you have an overlapping player on the far side who plays a long ball, for example. And there are ways this way that can be used. So a coach should have some interest in learning a little bit about the loss of the game, because it will actually benefit their coaching at the end of the day. Just like referees are looking to coaches to learn more about the tactics in the game and how they can help them develop better and become better referees and be in the right place at the right time to make the right decision, the same thing happens the other way around. If coaches learn about refereeing and about the loss of the game, they can actually take advantage of some of those situations in a match.
No, very, very valid points. We have some questions via Twitter. As mentioned earlier, we're not going to the open forum this time around because last time it prolonged proceedings by about 3 hours, if you remember. But some great questions via Twitter. This one's towards Nigel. What can clubs do to better support our coaches and their development?
I'm not sure what way clubs are run in Canada in terms of the structure, committees or whatever. In Northern Ireland, clubs are usually run by a committee, which often at junior level are parents. And the association is working hard to encourage all clubs to appreciate the importance of developing coaches. Consequently, we're trying to find ways to help them get the financial resources to send coaches on courses, and also to include within all their training the issues in and around child protection and respect towards referees and people from different cultures, because I think at the lower level, those whole areas of properly trained coaches and issues about getting clubs to make sure they send people on courses relating to child protection and respect are significant in improving the game.
Ian, would you agree with that?
Yeah, what you'd like to see is a club be able to support their coaches in getting coaching education, typically in their own community. So first we'll bring it to the community. One common thing in the States is that we'll pay for the coach's education, but he or she commits to a couple of years with the club. So the first thing is to make it easy for them to access, bring it to them, and support them in accessing it with dollars. And then those brighter ones, the ones who are going to push on, get them to go to coaching education away from your club, because then they're being integrated in with people with other experiences. So as you start to develop, you want to go to residential courses and be in with a mixture of coaches, not exclusively from your own community.
Rob, one for you, and this is a beauty. You're going to love this one. It could take a while. You may have heard it before a few times. If you look at who's in development in the pool right now for the men in Canada, when can we reasonably expect to qualify for a World Cup? 2018, 2022, 2020? We want an answer today.
I think you can expect us to continue to push for it. We're close now. If we take points against Mexico and get into the hex, then I think it's wide open for us. And I think you have to understand where we are in the structure of the game, the professional leagues, everything else. It's only going to continue to develop from them. So as the structures, the high performance leagues, the great work that the coaches are doing here and the game evolves, then there should be increased expectation with that. But you can't say that we're not in the mix right now, whatever anybody else wants to say. I think if we take points at home against Mexico, you'll see us in the hex.
I was speaking to you last week, I think it was, and you were saying how your current group of players are really kind of going under the radar right now compared to the previous group, and how that will actually benefit them long term. Can you talk about the current group you have?
Yeah, I think there's a tendency you get cycles of players, and as soon as a team does well, yes, this is the generation. We want to label them. We want to call this player the next great hope and everything else. And it's unfair in youth football to label groups, and specifically our last U20s. We raised expectations by not losing back-to-back games for 2.5 years, and we got some great results all over the world, big competitions, Milk Cup included in Northern Ireland. This next group, we haven't done that yet. Obviously, we're taking a mix of ages into England and hope to get results. But I think with any group, you have to take them on their merits. Some groups, there's specific individual talents. That doesn't necessarily mean the collective is going to be that great. You can look at Real Madrid as a prime example with the individual rather than the collective. But this next pool, there's some great talent out there. The level, we were discussing it with the learning facilitators, the technical level of player coming to us at 15 now is increasing all the time. And there's a great spirit in the current group with these 1997. So we're hopeful, and above all else, we're hopeful that more players progress into our senior setup, because my role as a youth coach is to hand on the best players. It's not just about team or individual results.
We covered the Euro qualifying process on Sportsnet, and we're all amazed by these smaller teams doing so well. Northern Ireland, Iceland qualify for Euro. Great stories. I'm curious, Nigel, and you also, Ian, where is Canada seen on the world stage?
I'm just checking how many people are
Bit
in
of a
the
loaded
audience.
question, I know.
and where the exit door is. Thanks for that one.
Anytime.
It's difficult for us to assess. I mean, Canada's been over and participated in the Milk Cup and played exceptionally well in the Milk Cup and played against Mexico in that competition. So that was an opportunity for us to assess the quality of the developmental stage of players in Canada. And we've known some of the senior players. For example, Jason DeVos is on a course and has played over in the UK. And some of our own Northern Ireland players, Jimmy Nicholl, Terry Moore, have played in Canada. So we have an idea. We do know it's been difficult for them to qualify. But from what I've seen at the underage level, particularly a couple of years ago in the Milk Cup when they watched them play against teams like Mexico and Northern Ireland, the progression has been very, very good. So I would tend to feel, and it's just a feeling because I've no hard evidence until it happens, that Canada are very close to making that last step, which is to qualify. And I think once you make it, then it becomes a little bit easier to do again and again, because you get a kick-on effect in terms of the level of enthusiasm, the participation levels go up. We suffered after 82 in not being able to maintain it. Now we've had a tremendous lift currently in football in Northern Ireland by qualifying again, and we hope now that we can generate more and more quality into the game on the back of that. That's what I think. If Canada makes it, and I believe they're close, then I think you will see Canada more regularly in finals. Certainly the women's game is very strong here, as it is in the US, way better than what it is across Europe in most cases.
Just say on that as well, with the same with the youth teams. When you actually go to a World Cup and you understand the need, like players like Jordan Hamilton who came through with us as a year young, then the belief is there, but also those experiences as you pick up like anything. You don't know until you're there, and then that transfers from the next qualifying campaign, the lessons learned, etc. So it's a key point. When we get there, we need to then make it a consistent effort.
Good answers, and I think you can leave safely, Nigel. You're okay. you pass with flying colours with that one. Our next question is for you, Silviu. This will be a good one, actually. Have you ever had a situation on the field that felt like it might get out of control?
Only once or a couple times?
This past month.
Yes. It's happened with me in one game when I have to issue a red card in the second minute, and I find out it was out of control, because issue that early the card, you feel pressure and you feel the game is going to go out of control, but if you control that, you can do the games, like I said, out of the questions, it's part of be yourself, be confident in the games.
Staying then with the referee theme here, mentorship's important, I think, at all facets of life. Caroline, question for you is, did you have any mentors growing up in refereeing?
Absolutely. I think I had different ones at different stages. I was really lucky Sonia Denoncourt, who was a Canadian FIFA referee, who was refereeing men's professional games, and at the World Cup and Olympics was kind of my predecessor. So I knew my dream could come true eventually, and that there would be an opportunity. And I think in every level that I had an instructor or somebody who took an interest in helping me. For example, when I was developing from a national referee to a FIFA referee, I was in university at McGill, and so I was in Quebec, away from Ontario where I had grown up, and there were a couple instructors that really took the time to come out when I got my first professional men's appointment to watch me, not to assess me, but to be there as a friend and a supporter to help make sure in the month that I had to prepare for my first men's game at the professional level that we just went out after the game and had discussions about what they thought I could do better, what they were looking for at the next level, what the assessors wanted, what the players wanted, what the coaches wanted, so that first game when I stepped out there and my mouth was dry and I blew the whistle at the beginning, I was ready. I didn't have any doubt that I could referee that game. They had really given me the confidence that I needed. I had no doubt I could control the game. What I was worried about were players coming out to do something crazy that I wasn't expecting. I knew that I had done everything I could do, and that was what they were there to make sure I had done, is what did I need to do to make sure I was ready and there to support me no matter what happened. I was lucky I got out of there okay, but they were there to support me as a friend no matter what happened. And it's essential at every level. Coming home from a grassroots soccer game can be one of the worst things ever. The games that go terrible, I say it takes more courage to walk out in the middle of a local park than it does when I walked out in Wembley, because I couldn't hear what people were saying about me. But on a local park, those referees hear every single thing that you say, and it's very personal. It's not personal when 42,000 or 72,000 people boo you. It's very personal when parents are speaking about young kids, and it really is. I still find it difficult to show up at a local park for people who have never seen me referee, because it really is about me. It's not about refereeing. It's not about the game. It's not about supporting the team that you're there to support. It really becomes personal. So I think that's important to know as well.
It's a great point. And Ian, I'm sure, mentorship overall, be it from the official standpoint to the player standpoint, a young kid, even an adult, you need that to progress.
Yeah, I talk about it in some of the presentations we're doing now on leadership and development for coaches. I definitely had mentors that I can point to. However, they were unaware that they were my mentors, and there was no intentionality in their mentorship. And so I think as a young coach or as a young referee, you must go and seek a mentor, but you must also make it clear to that mentor that you're looking for that they need to be explicit and intentional in that mentorship. I think some of us become, largely because we just get older, we become inspirations or we become role models. But I think we also need to make sure that the mentor is fully engaged in the process.
We have one last question, and it's for you, Ian, as well, actually. It's via Twitter. Canada and the US both have to deal with their geography as a hindrance towards their development. Is there any solution to that? apart from supersonic flight?
It's a great question. And I was recently with the Belgium FA, and the very first thing they said to a group of North American coaches was, we have a massive advantage over you. We're a small country, and we can manage our development. My sort of standard response is we have to embrace those economies of scale or diseconomies of scale and manage them in our context. So there's no easy answer in the case of Hawaii to New York being 6 time zones big, and we also have amazing cultural diversity. Certainly, just in the Midwest alone, where I happen to live, I could get Hmong Laotian players, I could get East African players, obviously Hispanic players, but that is the job of the North American coach. So we must steal the best practices from Northern Ireland or the best practices from the Dutch, but then we must apply them in our context.
Rob, you're smirking there when you're hearing about the geographical issues North American coaches face. I mean, it has to be just an enormous headache on so many occasions.
It's very challenging. Coming from England as well, and we say it's like a continent really here, but that's where your partners and these events are so important for us, and the partnerships and the relationships that we have with the provincial associations, with the clubs, with the coaches, everybody. Obviously it's the same in assessing and refereeing, because it's impossible to scout, and the game is global now. Even if the Serbia coach who won the U20s, he lives in Spain. You don't have to be in your country because your players are all over. But that's where your network, your relationships are the key. And it's like anything. You can find excuses or you can work to find solutions, and that's what we need to do.
Well, listen, guys, thank you so much. Really enjoyed this. Great insight, great information, and certainly the future is very bright, from officials to coaching to player development. For our panelists, thank you very much.